This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Christopher Mitchell, 212th Trooper, Silas 1610, Carmen CJ, Rune Scribble, Legendary Ray, and Ash. When next we see our heroes, it is for a solemn affair. Grandpa Max's memorial. While one had been held officially with Ben, Gwen and Kevin all attending, this is for those who'd been involved in the clandestine side of his life, with Gwen and Kevin having worked tirelessly to prepare a proper plumber send-off, contacting people like Wes and Kai Green, and the Mans including Lucy, was taking a brief break from the Plumber Academy to pay respects to her surrogate grandpa. Even Max's brother Gordon and his wife Betty Jean have agreed to keep a lid on their xenophobia, since Kevin had made it abundantly clear that he will not hesitate to throw them out if they do not, with the duo attending alongside their son Joel. Together, this hodgepodge group of aliens and plumbers, family and friends, all gather at Max's favourite fishing spot to say some words in his memory, as well as to openly discuss how he died without the usual need for secrecy. As the ones who had been with him at the end, the trio each give their accounts, and while Gwen and Kevin are able to convey the tragedy and the heroism of Max's final act, Ben's evocative retelling, coloured by passion, guilt, and most of all respect for his grandfather, leaves several of the attendees misty-eyed. Though this is not all they are, as wanting to follow in Max's example, they all resolve to help fight the hybrid invasion, promising the kids that when the day comes, they need only call on them. Having hoped something like this might happen, Kevin sets to work coordinating with retired plumbers, while Kai and Lucy pull Ben aside to give their more personal condolences, with this leaving Gwen at something of a loose end. That is until she spots an elderly woman moving through the crowd of mourners, despite having not been one of the invitees. Not only that, but Gwen is pretty sure she saw everyone arrive, and she does not remember this woman, with this prompting her to approach and question who she is. Eyes glinting mischievously, the stranger replies that her name is Verdona, and that when she heard that they were hosting this little memorial for Max, she just had to drop by. Placidly, Gwen asks if Verdona was a friend of his, to which the older woman chuckles that she was more than a friend, beckoning for the girl to follow her to a tree, where the words Max plus Verdona are carved in the bark surrounded by a heart. A little surprised, Gwen apologizes for not knowing. Her grandpa just didn't like to talk about his love life much. However, instead of being upset, at the word grandpa, Verdona's face splits into a wide grin, as she states that she's Frank's daughter, isn't she? Being smart enough to connect the dots, Gwen replies that she's guessing Verdona is her grandma then, with this just earning her a coy wink and 2 taps to the side of the old woman's nose. Figuring Ben will want to meet their grandmother too, the red-haired girl excuses herself and goes to fetch her cousin, with the boy indeed being quite excited as he begins to chat with Verdona. However, for some reason she seems much less interested in him than she did Gwen, treating him politely but dispassionately. Picking up on this, Ben asks if he's done something wrong. Though shaking her head, the old woman assures him that it's not his fault. He simply lacks the spark like his father, uncle, and cousin can. Nodding in a way that shows he does not understand, the brunette continues that Gwen, on the other hand, does have this spark, right? Smiling now, though still in that placid way, Verdona confirms that yes, she has it quite strongly, though this just begs the question of what exactly the spark is. Figuring showing will be easier than telling, the elderly woman manifests a beam of mana just like Gwen's, and uses it to lift a nearby boulder in a demonstration that her powers are even greater than the girl's, with this getting everyone's attention as they turn to face her. Feigning embarrassment, Verdona sighs that she's gone and done it now, so she's going to duck out, though before she goes, she promises Gwen that they'll talk again soon. Then, in a flash of pink light, she vanishes. As it turns out, soon means that evening, as when Kevin prepares to take the Tennysons home, he, Gwen, and Ben spot Verdona through the living room window of Gwen's house, having seemingly turned the place into a disco from the way the lights keep changing colour. Evidently, Gwen's mother Natalie is not amused, barely saying a word when the trio enter, though Verdona is more than willing to pick up her slack, as she explains that she was just telling her parents how impressive it was that she alone saw through her concealment. Well, she guesses the earthling word would be spell. Realizing this must be what caused her grandmother to gravitate towards her, Gwen modestly states that it wasn't anything special, to which Verdona retorts that it could be with proper training. Since even self-taught as she is, the girl has immense potential. Leaning in so only Kevin and Gwen can hear him, Ben whispers that this could be great, since more magic training would be super useful for combating the hybrid invasion, though having employed some form of magical eavesdropping, Verdona chuckles that she's afraid Gwen will have to miss that particular little squabble, as to teach her properly they'll have to return to Anodyne and stay there for a while she learns to harness her true Anodite form, since that is the source of her power. Furrowing his brow, Kevin asks how long's a while, dial, to which the old woman breezily shrugs, only 60 or 70 years. Understandably, this causes a tense silence to fall in the room, though wanting to be there for his daughter in this crucial moment, Frank assures her that there's no pressure to go, but if this is what she wants, he and her mother will support her unconditionally. Unfortunately, this only makes things more confusing for Gwen, who says she needs a minute before retreating to her room. Figuring it would be a bad look to follow her, Ben and Kevin slip out through the front door and around the back, at which point Ben transforms into a multicolored alien named Blocks and alters the shape of his body to build some stairs for Kevin to climb up to Gwen's window, before he makes use of the alien's monkey-like arms to scale the building right after him. Reverting to human, Ben then joins the others on Gwen's bed as he asks what his cousin plans on doing. Truthfully, she doesn't know, since this is all so much to take in when this morning she didn't even know she had a grandma, let alone a magical alien one, with her telling the guys as much and asking what they think. Bluntly, Ben states that she shouldn't go, since it'll be way too long and she has a life and friends here on Earth. However, before he can say more, Kevin flatly tells him to shut up. Turning to face him, Gwen asks if the Osmosian really thinks she should go with Verdona, to which Kevin replies that while he doesn't want her to go, he's not that much of a jerk that he'd stand in her way if this is what she needs. After all, he gets it better than anyone, since while it sucked to leave his friends and mum, plumber training was something he needed to do. This response earns a small smile from Gwen, followed by a kiss on the cheek as she thanks him, since that helped make things a lot clearer for her. Blushing profusely, Kevin stutters that it did, clearly afraid to ask in what way, though fortunately Gwen does not keep him and Ben in suspense for long, as she states that it's like Kevin said, he felt a deep need to go into space and become a plumber. She doesn't feel that about going to Anodyne. Not when she can still study magic here on Earth and be close to the people she cares about. Letting out a sigh of relief, Ben grins that they should go tell Verdona that, though when they do, the woman does not take this well, calling Gwen's choice short-sighted and declaring that if she won't come willingly, then she'll just have to destroy her human body and free the energy being within. With this declaration, Verdona sheds her own skin, becoming an entity of pure mana, before launching an attack that sends Ben, Gwen, and Kevin crashing through the window and into the yard. Seeing that a fight is inevitable, Gwen begins hurling mana discs and Kevin coats himself in stone, while Ben activates the Omnitrix and transforms into a new alien he dubs NRG. Thanks to the data dump, Ben is immediately aware of everything NRG can do, including leave the clunky containment suit and fly up to fire a radiation beam at his grandmother. This seems to genuinely amuse Verdona, as she laughs that it's cute he'd become a Pripietosian bee to try and be like Grandma, but unfortunately, they're not quite the same, since while they're both energy beings, Anodites are in a whole other league, considering they can harness their energy as magic. In an attempt to prove this point, she then summons a mana wall to deflect the blast back at Ben, before making the wall malleable, as it snakes over and traps him like a rolled up carpet. Luckily, this serves as just the distraction Gwen and Kevin need, with the former launching mana discs, while the latter quickly absorbs all the radiation Ben is outputting, and immediately launches it back at Verdona as a series of rapid-fire energy blasts. While these are no more effective than Ben's attack, the sight of the pair working together like a cute couple only amuses Verdona more, so that she almost regrets slamming her hair into the boy, and sending him crashing through the fence. However, it is necessary, as this gives her a chance to speak more directly with Gwen, asking if she can't see how much greater she could be with proper training. Respectfully, Gwen admits that she does, but there's so much she'd miss out on if she left, like the love Grandma found with Grandpa Max, the kind of love that made her come back to Earth today. Letting out a sigh, Verdona admits that she did have a lot of happy times with Max, and that she can see him in Gwen through her wisdom, just like she sees his passion in Ben. Alright, if she really wants to stay, she won't force her, though that doesn't mean she won't be checking up on the girl's progress from time to time. Smiling softly, Gwen replies that she'd like that, with the pair sharing a tender goodbye that even Ben is invited to join once Verdona remembers to release him from the mana rug. Then, after repairing the damage with a snap of her fingers, she takes off into the sky once more bound for Anodyne, even if she is a little disappointed to be going home alone. From here, things return to normal, or at least what counts as normal for the trio, as they spend their evenings underneath Max's plumbing or else out on patrol. However, it is during one of these patrols that an encounter almost as strange as the one with Verdona occurs, as a trio of Forever Knights mounted on their hover steeds approach without warning. Figuring they must be looking for a fight, Ben activates the Omnitrix's dial, though before he can pick an alien, the Knight's leader, Sir Connor, explains that they have actually come seeking an alliance. Last night, a terrifying dragon escaped from their castle, so now they require the power of Ben Tennyson and his friends to help recapture it before it wreaks havoc across Bellwood. Though they don't particularly like the idea of working with the Forever Knights, the thought of civilian casualties is a strong motivator, and when Ben looks to Kevin, who confirms that his well-honed scam detector tells him these guys are shockingly on the level, the brunette agrees, telling the Knights to lead the way. By hacking into military transmissions, the Knights have an idea of the dragon's last location, meaning tracking it is not much of a challenge. Though that is not to say this is an easy endeavor, as when they find the dragon, it is unwilling to return to captivity, with a fight breaking out almost immediately. Since the objective is to capture the dragon rather than kill it, Ben chooses to transform into Arctiguana here, with the plan being to freeze it solid. Unfortunately, due to its massive size, the best he can do is freeze its legs to the ground when it lands. Though this is more than good enough for Connor, who has his squire ready the quantum disassembler cannon, and then takes aim at the beast. Spotting this, Gwen protests that Ben's still in the blast radius, while Kevin orders him to stop since he's noticed something none of the rest of them have, though paying these foolish children no mind, the Forever Knight champion opens fire. Urgently, Gwen cries for Ben to look out, with this warning perhaps saving his life, as at the last second he is able to create an ice wall that takes the blast in his stead, though this comes at the cost of the dragon also being spared, freeing it up to breathe energy down on its feet and fly away. Naturally, Sir Connor is livid, though he isn't the only one, with Ben, Gwen and Kevin all rounding on him and demanding to know how dare he use them like bait when they're supposed to be on the same side. Coldly, Connor retorts that obviously they lack a knight's resolve, as any sworn sword would be honored to lay down their life to defeat a monster like that. Though just as icily, Kevin retorts that maybe they only think that way because they don't understand it. Brusquely, Connor asks what is there to understand? The dragon is a mere beast. Though shaking his head, the black-haired plumber retorts that it's not. He spotted a busted old galvanic universal translator on its chest, which means it's A, intelligent, B, an alien, and C, at least benevolent enough that it wanted to be able to talk with the population of this world. Though he very much doubts it still wants that after the forever idiots locked it up and tried to kill it because they didn't understand what it was. Getting heated now, Connor barks that he will not be spoken down to by some insolent plumber whelp, since his order only exists to protect humanity from the monsters the plumbers let stroll through the door without consideration for the threat they might pose. However, unlike his lackeys, Kevin cannot be intimidated by raised voices and bluster, as he retorts the plumbers do everything they can to ensure safe and harmonious coexistence between humans and aliens, and while sometimes there will be criminals they must stop, that does not mean they should consider every alien a criminal and a threat. That kind of short-sighted bigotry accomplishes nothing except getting them into situations like this one, with whatever damage the dragon does from here being on the knight's hands. Having been somewhat frightened by Kevin's intensity and the news that the dragon is a person and not a monster, Connor's squire pipes up as he informs them that he doesn't think it will continue rampaging, since according to the records of its capture, it was found with an unidentifiable artifact that has been placed in storage, so perhaps if it's intelligent, it will go looking for its lost property. Furiously, Connor roars that he'll have the boy flogged for this disloyalty, though when Gwen manifests mana in her hands, Kevin turns his stone fist into a mace, and Ben places his hand over the Omnitrix ready to transform again. The Knight leader storms back to his hover steed and growls that their alliance is over, so if they try to interfere in his hunt, they will be treated as targets the same as the dragon. In spite of this warning, when Ben looks to his friends, there is no disagreement that they're definitely getting involved, since if the dragon's actually an alien who's been brutalized by the Knights, then it's their responsibility to do whatever they can to help it and keep it out of the Tin Head's hands. Hopping back in Kevin's car, the trio make haste for the only storage facility in the direction the dragon was heading, though even with Kevin's propensity to break traffic laws, they still arrive after the winged alien, so that when they come into view, it immediately grows hostile. However, before round 2 can break out, Kevin springs into action, holding up his badge and assuring the dragon that he's a plumber, and he's here to help. After its mistreatment at the hands of humans, the dragon is understandably loath to take this on faith, though when Gwen offers her sincerest apologies before floating the badge up to the dragon so it can inspect it and the universal translator built into the badge can activate, the green Goliath lets out a deep mournful sigh and accepts the plumber's offer of aid. In a heartsick voice, he, rather than it, explains how he came to this world as a mapmaker 1,000 years ago, only to be unjustly imprisoned by a band of faceless thugs in armor without warning or provocation. He never did them any wrong, and he could have shared the gifts of his people with them, but instead of trying to understand him, they locked him in a cage and made him their monster. He hasn't seen his mate or his child in centuries. He's probably missed his child learning how to fly and so much else, all because of those knights and their thoughtless, dogmatic cruelty. Knowing no platitude can make such an injustice right, Ben, Gwen, and Kevin ask the only question that matters. How can they help? With the dragon explaining that the object stored here is his ship, so if they can assist him in getting it started, then he can go home at last. Agreeing that this is for the best, the trio begins setting to work, with the vessel thankfully being in good condition, so it doesn't take much to get it up and running. However, in this short time, Connor and his knights arrive, clearly intent on slaying the beast now that it is cornered. Urgently, Gwen tells the dragon to go before it's too late, though at the sight of his captors and tormentors, a rage he thought had cooled re-erupts inside the dragon, as he bellows that he will leave soon, though first he is going to punish those who stole 1,000 years of his life. With this declaration comes a burst of energy breath that forces the knights to take cover, as Connor cheers that he hopes the others see now. This dragon is not some poor innocent traveler, it's a monster who came here to sow death, destruction, and the end of life as they know it. Having grown incredibly sick of his nonsense, Ben just snaps at Connor to shut up already, before transforming into a round green alien, and blasting him and his goons with a torrent of thick slime. From beside him, Kevin grins that's a Spheroid form. Nice! Though, when Gwen questions what's so nice about a big green pufferfish that shoots liquid snot, the Osmosian chuckles that he's glad she asked. Spheroid slime is used instead of wiring in a lot of high-end alien tech, since it's roughly 100 times as conductive as copper, and the electricity loses none of its charge while passing through. To demonstrate this, he grabs hold of a nearby power box and begins absorbing some electricity, before discharging it into the slime trail Ben's new alien has left behind. As this leads directly to the drenched knights in their metal armor, they all let out cries as they are shocked and blasted back, with most passing out from the undiluted power of that attack. In an attempt to de-escalate, Gwen states that the knights are beaten so the dragon can go now, though still in that tone of fury, the green alien bellows that they're beaten now, but tomorrow they'll get back up and terrorize who knows how many other innocent travelers. The only way to ensure that they don't is to kill them here and now. Horrified, Ben and Gwen protest that he can't, though Kevin has a different response, agreeing that they probably have it coming at this point. But this isn't about them, it's about the dragon, and the kind of guy he wants to be. Does he want to be the monster these jerks say he is? Or does he want to be the sort of dad his kid can be proud of? The one who, when given the choice, went home to his family? For a moment, no one speaks. Then, with a soft, thoughtful growl, the dragon replies that the plumber is right. He will not debase himself by becoming the same sort of scum as these knights, though he asks a favor in return for his mercy. Remain vigilant, and do not allow their atrocities to go unchallenged, a promise Ben is happy to make, as he assures their new friend that they'll be keeping a close eye on the Forever Knights from here on out, and whenever they start something, the three of them will kick their butts and send them packing. Evidently satisfied with this answer, the dragon departs, boarding his ship and returning to space, while limping back to his steed with his men in tow. Connor snarls that he hopes they're happy, since now that they've let this monster go free, there'll be an invasion of dragons, and it will all be these soft-hearted fools' fault. Then, without a backward glance, the knights fly off as well. While looking over at Kevin, Gwen asks whether they should give chase. For a moment, the Osmosian considers it, before ultimately deciding it's more important they get back to HQ and make sure nothing stops the dragon from leaving safely. Though Ben was spot on. From here on out, they're not tolerating any more of the Knights' xenophobic BS. However, as is always the way, the Knights not the team's only concern, as a few days later they find themselves battling a rogue Tekadon robot in a warehouse at the edge of town. Here Brainstorm proves incredibly useful, as between his electrokinesis and advanced intelligence, he's able to find just the right place to blast the robot, rendering it inert and ending the battle with minimal damage. This earns high praise from Kevin, who almost salivates as he claims that a mostly intact battle robot is a great find, and that if they can get inside it and reconfigure its master registration, they could have it do all kinds of useful stuff for them. Suspecting that useful stuff is monitor duty, so that he can go driving or spend more time hanging out with Ben, when skeptically asked what official plumber procedure is for such an acquisition, with this making him chuckle that sometimes it's okay to bend the rules a little, though when the redhead crosses her arms and raises her eyebrows, he sighs that they're supposed to package it up and send it off to research Satellite Delta, which he will. Satisfied with this outcome, Gwen smiles and calls this good before climbing back into the Max's plumbing truck, leaving Ben and Kevin alone, with the latter looking quite dejected at losing out on his robot, while the former just pats his best friend on the back and sympathetically states that he shouldn't take it too hard, since better men than him have fallen to the Gwen stare. As a result of this, the episode The Gauntlet is mostly skipped, since on top of the titular Gauntlet being sent away, Kevin also isn't known around town as a tough guy, so Cash and JT have no motive to target him. Likewise, due to Savant is not turning them into alien hybrids, Helen, Manny, and Pierce don't become the plumber's helpers, meaning the episode of that name also does not happen. Instead, Kevin begins working with the allies from the memorial, since while many of them are ex-plumbers, he wants them back to active duty standard by the time of the battle. This also means training up people such as Kai, who never went through plumber boot camp, a job he gets Ben and Gwen to help with, since Kai has still not forgiven him for acting like a jerk back when they were kids. Whether intentional or not, this does result in Ben and Kai spending a lot of time in close quarters, with this causing some old feelings to resurface in the brunette, though for now, this is all they remain as, feelings, since they have an invasion to focus on, and he has not yet forgotten how uncomfortable things have been with Julie since their failed date at the pier. Subsequently, the next event of note occurs when the trio head to the abandoned Lost Soledad military base to investigate a string of reports around strange sounds, unearthly lights, and weird creatures. When they arrive, they find a scene of devastation, as something has burned deep trails into the ground and torn distinctly person-shaped holes through the walls of several buildings as well as the outer wall of the little town itself. Not only that, but several fossilized remains of small birds and lizards dot these trails, making them even more mysterious, so that when they get out of the car to have a closer look, Ben suggests they stay close together. This is smart, as a few moments later they catch sight of a blue blurred creature rushing towards them while more of these burns follow in its wake. Figuring this thing must be the cause, the team prepare to battle, though to their surprise the entity actively avoids them, instead brushing up against the side of a building that suddenly collapses as if it was aged years in a second. From this, they're able to conclude that this is some connection to time, and that it's presumably looking for something here on the base, since as they saw coming in, it has no trouble making holes in the outer walls, so it could leave easily if it wanted. Wisely, Gwen proposes they visit the library to see what they can learn about this place, with it coming to light that this base was built to facilitate a time experiment called Project Paradox, which involved a large quartz ring of some sort. Taking this as their next lead, the team investigate, finding only a single burned trail coming from the ring, meaning either it came in here and vanished, or more probably, it was born here. At these words, something clatters behind them, and fearing it's the entity, Ben becomes Swampfire and rushes over to grab the source of the sound, only to find a man from one of the articles they had just been researching, except in the 50 years since the project, he has not aged a day. In spite of this hostile first impression, the stranger responds with a fond chuckle, greeting Ben by name and asking if they've met yet, with this only confusing the boy more, as he, Gwen, and Kevin assail the man with questions. Unfortunately, in return they get no real answers, beyond the claim that this creature is a space-time anomaly, and that he was attempting to draw it in with loud noise. In this, the man is quite successful, as the anomaly comes rushing towards them, though fortunately here Kevin does not make the foolish mistake of running in to punch it, instead putting his tactical training to use as he and Ben use energy blasts and fireballs to try and slow it down. However, unlike the mystery man, their attempts fizzle, quite literally, as the fire goes out and the energy dissipates before it can even hit its target. Nonchalantly, the stranger chuckles this was a good guess, but he's afraid they'll need something a bit more enduring if they want to damage this creature. As he says this, something in the anomaly shifts, with it changing course and going right for the strange scientist, having seemingly lost all interest in the boys despite being the ones who attacked it. This is twice now that it has actively avoided fighting them, with Gwen posing the question of whether it's actually hostile, something both Ben and Kevin second, and knowing them all well enough to be sure they won't be much use to him if he doesn't answer their questions. The man transports himself and the teens to a safe rooftop near the edge of the base. For their first order of business, the trio want to know who this guy is, though since he does not remember his own name, they settle on calling him Professor Paradox. This at the very least simplifies matters, as Paradox recounts how when the project bearing the same name went awry, he was sucked into a time vortex within the quartz ring. There he stayed for millennia, unable to sleep or eat or age, and after a while of going mad, he got bored with that, and so chose to directly study the mechanics of space-time, so that now he can travel through little seams in reality to help those in need. However, unlike his usual foes, this one does not operate like a regular linear temporal being, having been seemingly flung forward from its original time period, which was 50 years ago, to now, where it exposes anything it touches to the full harshness of eternity. Getting an idea, Ben moves over to the edge of the roof and takes a look at the creature's trail from a wider angle, finding that after leaving the lab, it went first to the police station and then to something that looks like apartments, with these being the places someone might go if they needed help. Deeming this a rather astute observation, Paradox asks if Ben is suggesting this entity might be a victim rather than a villain, to which the boy nods that perhaps when the experiment unstuck him from time, it also did the same to someone else and made them into the creature. Noting that this is so like Ben to look at the unknown as someone who might need his help rather than as an enemy, Paradox confirms that there were others in the lab with him that night, so it's possible one of them might have become the anomaly, though this does not tell them how they are meant to stop it. Bluntly, Kevin suggests they just go back in time and prevent the experiment, though Paradox flatly refuses, since his Time Walker powers have saved reality a dozen times over, so he cannot afford to undo the incident that made him what he is. As the voice of reason, Gwen proposes why not go back and make sure that nothing happens to anyone else, since that way, Paradox can still go through the portal, but whoever became the entity won't. Sighing gravely, the professor warns that this is a dangerous plan, since his and the entity's actions have made the walls of time in Los Soledad paper thin, so if they fail, they will not have a second chance, and they run the risk of tearing a hole through space-time itself. Though refusing to let someone innocent suffer, the trio nod that they understand, but they want to try anyway. Seeing that a verdict has been reached, Paradox does as he is bid, transporting them all back to the night of the accident, with them slipping inside the lab and watching closely. For the most part, it is just military types and Paradox himself, though Kevin quickly points out a small nervous man who the professor fondly claims is his lab assistant Hugo. Wisely, Ben decides to keep an eye on him, with this proving prudent, as when the time vortex first opens and the others celebrate, Hugo instead panics, stumbling back and inadvertently crashing into a piece of sensitive-looking machinery. This, as it turns out, is the tipping point, as suddenly the moment of triumph becomes one of chaos, with the portal growing unstable and beginning to suck in everything in the vicinity. While the soldiers are safe behind a pane of glass, Paradox and Hugo are not, with the former being pulled closer while the latter clings desperately to the machine as his legs are pulled into the air. At the look of terror on his face, Ben, Gwen and Kevin all move to help, though sternly, the Paradox of their time urges them to wait, as they can only act after he has been pulled in, because he did not know them back then, and any changes to his history could have catastrophic ripple effects. Respecting that he probably does know best here, the trio reluctantly wait until the Paradox of the past has been pulled into the vortex and vanished, though by now, Hugo is hanging on by his fingertips. As the quickest of the team, Ben dashes into view, yelling for the lab assistant to grab his hand, though before he can, the man loses his grip and begins spinning through the air as he is sucked towards the gaping portal. Knowing now that this must be how the space-time anomaly was born, Gwen and Kevin join Ben in the fray, using energy and mana blast to destroy the court's gateway, while the brunette deftly transforms into blocks, before reshaping his arm so that it is long and wide enough to catch the falling Hugo like a baseball, and deposit him safely on the ground when the vortex dissipates. In a shaking voice, the lab assistant thanks this strange technicolored ape and his teenage friends for their help, though unfortunately the soldiers are much less appreciative, drawing their guns as they bark at them to identify themselves and explain how they got into a top-secret base. Thankfully, it is at this moment that Paradox steps out from seemingly nowhere to stand behind the trio, as he chuckles that the timeline appears to have been corrected and the anomaly nullified, so it's time for them to leave. Not overly wanting to experience Cold War interrogation tactics, the heroes agree, so that a moment later, they all appear back in the present. However, unlike the present they left, there is no sign of the entity's path of destruction. Instead, they find an elderly man laying flowers at the base of the ruined court structure, while muttering what sounds like words for the departed. At the sound of their arrival, he looks around, having never encountered anyone else during his yearly trips to pay his respects, with it coming as a shock to the team that this is a much older Hugo, though their shock is nothing compared to his, as he could never forget the faces of those three strangers and the professor, none of whom seemed to have changed at all from the day he last saw them 50 years ago. In a tone of wonderment, the old lab assistant questions how they can all be here, to which Paradox chuckles that it's a rather long story, though he would be quite happy to tell him if he can spare the time. Smiling broadly, Hugo replies that it would be his pleasure, and that he is truly sorry for messing up the experiment all those years ago. Affably, Paradox tells him to think nothing of it, before asking what he's been up to since they parted ways, with it being Hugo's turn to laugh a little before replying that he's been busy, that's for sure, since after the professor went through the time vortex, he was saved by the strangest creature made of red, yellow, and blue interconnecting blocks. Feigning surprise, the Time Walker asks if that's so, to which Hugo nods, claiming that while he never found out what the creature was, he did think it looked like something his kids might enjoy and so patented the idea, with it going on to become something of a success. This earns a genuine laugh from Paradox, who admits that he always knew Hugo was destined for great things. Then, as he lays a hand around his former assistant's shoulder, the two old friends stroll off into the night, before slipping through one of those seams in reality and out of sight. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.